Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave with Evil Eye Games. Today I want to start fleshing out some stuff in the level. As you can see here, I have been kind of working on putting some levels together. And in this particular level, I have a couple of uses for a door. And I want to create a door, and I want to be able to use this door in several different situations as I need it. So we're going to create a kind of flexible door that we can use. And in order to do that, I'm going to start by going into our maps folder, and I'm going to put it in my common objects folder. And we're going to end up creating a new blueprint, and we want it to be an actor. And I'm going to name this our base door underscore BP. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to open up our base door. And we're going to end up with a blank blueprint here. So we're going to want to add the meshes for the door. So we're going to go under component and we're going to search for a mesh. And we're going to add a static mesh. So I'm going to add in this for the door frame. And then I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it and call it the left door. And we'll add a component, or we'll duplicate the left door. And we'll call it our right door. So for the door frame, I'm going to go ahead and for our static mesh, I'm going to find that door frame that I created. And then we're going to add in the left door and the right door. So we'll find our doors. And then for one of the doors, I'm going to have to end up rotating it around 180 degrees like that. And we have our door in place. Now we want to select the door frame first. And you'll notice up here in the transform, there is a mobility, movable, and a static. Now the door frame itself is not going to be moving around, so I want to set this to static. And that's going to basically make sure that when lighting is baked for the level, it is going to build the static lighting for this. But the doors, on the other hand, are going to be moving, so we want the shadowing to be dynamic. So for the two doors, I'm going to set it to, or I'm going to leave it as movable, and that's going to cause the mesh's shadowing to be calculated dynamically, so it's not going to be pre-baked, and it's not going to use the light maps that we created for those doors. So I'm going to go ahead and compile this. And we're going to go into our event graph. Now, in order to do this, we're going to need a couple of variables. So, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to add in a variable. And I'm going to call this isDoorLocked. And by default, I'm going to set this to false. But I want to make this public. So as we place the door in the level, we can set whether or not the door is locked. And we're also going to want to know what positions the doors are in when they're open and they're closed. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to create a new variable. And I want this to be a vector. And I'm going to call this, we'll name it to the doors. So we'll call a left door closed. And then we'll go ahead and duplicate this, and I'll create a left door open position. And then we'll duplicate again, and we'll create a right door closed and a right door open position. Now, if you have a more traditional door that pivots open, now, if you have a more positional door that rotates open, instead of using these vectors, I would use a rotator. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save this, and I want to set the values for these. Now, each door, if we go into the viewport and select on the door, our location is going to be set to 0 on both of these. So our closed positions are going to be values of 0. So that's what they are by default, and that's going to be fine. But if we want to go ahead and open the doors, if we go ahead and slide the doorway open, I'm going to find that my Y changes to 200 on our left door. So for our left door open here, I'm going to want to go ahead and set the Y value here to 200. And then if I want the other door to go ahead and move the same amount but in the opposite direction, we'll go ahead and select the right door open, and I'll set it to the negative value of 200. Now this is going to vary based on your static mesh that you're using. So I would go ahead and move it to the position that you wanted it open to, find out what the position is, and then go ahead and change it appropriately. So I'm going to go ahead and compile that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and we want to add in some overlap components. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to search for our box collision. And we'll just call this box 1 for now. And we're going to want to move this into position on one side of the door here. And we're going to go ahead and scale this up and move it so that it covers the front end of the door. And I want to make it a little bit bigger so that there's a little bit of space. So for the X, let's say I'm going to set the X to 4. And the Z I'll set to 4 as well. And then for the Y here, we want it to cover the breadth of the door. So let's try 5. Maybe 6. Maybe 7. All right, so that should cover it. And we want to go ahead and line it up position-wise in front of the door. And so that way when a character passes into this box, we can go ahead and trigger the doors opening. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this box. And we'll just call it box 2. And right now it's set to negative 160 on the X, which is across the panel. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it a positive 160. So it'll sit on the opposite side of our door. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save this. And we're going to go over to our event graph. And I'm going to grab our box 1 and our box 2 here. And we're going to right click and we're going to add on component begin overlap. And then I'm going to do the same thing with our box 2. So that way when something overlaps with one of these boxes, we can go ahead and trigger an event. And we want to trigger an event to go ahead and open the door. And we also want to go ahead and create events to close the door as well. So I'll select each one, add a on component end overlap. Now, if you want the door to just open and stay open, you can forget the part about on component end overlap, so that when somebody runs into the overlap box, it's just going to open and it's going to remain open. And so we want to create some sort of functionality to open and close the door. So down on our graph here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to search for a custom event. And we're going to call this open doors. And then we're also going to need a custom event to close the doors. So I'm going to create a custom event. And I'll call it close doors. Now what we want to happen when the doors open is we want them to slide outward in a smooth motion. So we're going to go ahead and create a new timeline. So I'm going to right click in the graph and search for timeline. And we're going to add timeline. And I'm going to call this just open door timeline. And we're going to double click on our timeline and open that up. The length of this I'm just going to set to 1 second. And then we'll go ahead and add a float track. And the track will call door position. And we'll go ahead and I'm going to add 2 keys to our float curve. The first one I'm going to set at times 0 and a value of 0. And the second one I'm going to set at a time of 1 with a value of 1. So if we fit that to our graph here, it just goes from a position of 0 at time 0 up to a position of 1 at time 1. So we can go ahead and compile this and close our open door timeline. Now we're actually going to have to go ahead and move our doors. So I'm going to grab the left door here. And we want to go ahead and we want to drag off of our left door here. And we want to set our location. But we want to set our relative location. The values that are stored in these vectors that we created are relative to our actor. So we want to set the relative location based on the relative position to our blueprint. And we're going to have to go ahead and we're going to get our left door closed and we're going to get our left door open values. And we want to go ahead and I'm going to drag off of our left door closed here and we're going to find a lerp for a vector. And we want to lerp between the door closed and the door open. And we're going to plug the return value into our new location. And our door position is going to be that alpha. And we're going to go ahead and connect the update pin to the set relative location. And that's going to handle the movement for our left door. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this. And we're going to move this, I guess, over to the right here. And we're going to connect this in as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and make a connection between our door position to the lerp on this other vector over here. And we're going to replace the values in here with our right door. So I'll grab our right door and replace our left door with the right door. Replace the left door closed with the right door closed. And we'll replace our right door open over the left door open. And then we'll go ahead and we'll connect our open doors to the play. And then in order to go ahead and close the doors, we're going to go ahead and connect our closed doors into the reverse. So it's going to go ahead and play this timeline backwards. So it will go from the left door open to the left door closed. And likewise for the right door, go from right door open to right door closed. And so we're going to go ahead and up here on our event overlap, we're going to drag out and we're going to call our open doors. And for the end overlap, we're going to go ahead and call the closed doors. And then we're going to do the same exact thing for our other set of boxes here. So we'll go ahead and compile and save. And we're going to have to drag this into our level here. So I have a specific position I want to put this. So I'm going to get rid of this door frame. And then we're going to drag in our new door. And we'll go ahead and lock it into place. So let's go ahead and save this. And we'll go ahead and hit play. And let's see how this works. So if my character moves up here, when I enter into it, it goes ahead and opens the doors. And then when I walk out of it, it closes the doors again. Now, you'll notice that there is an issue with when he ends up leaving one of the boxes as he's traveling through the door will start closing. So in order to simplify this, I'm just going to go ahead and in our viewport here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to actually get rid of one of the boxes. So I'm going to get rid of this box number 1. We're going to go ahead and delete it. And then I'm going to change the X scaling here. We're going to set it up to 8, so we'll double the value of it. and then we'll place its X location at 0, so there's spacing on both sides of the door. And then we'll compile, and in our event graph, this box 2 no longer exists, so we can go ahead and get rid of these. And we'll go ahead and compile and save that. And if we hit play, our character will move along. We're going to go ahead and enter in. And then once we leave the box, it'll go ahead and close again. And so now we have a functional two-way door that our character can move through. Now, the one thing that's going to come up with this is the begin to overlap right now is blocking our weapons. So we're going to go to our box and we're going to go to the collision section. And we're going to have to modify the collision so that it doesn't do anything with our weapons. So I'm going to go to custom and query only no physics collision is fine. Our object type is fine, but we want to go ahead and turn off the object responses to our weapon trace, so we don't want it to block where our weapon is aiming towards. And we want to turn off our weapon channel collision as well. We don't want it to block our weapons collision. So let's go ahead and compile and save that, and we'll hit play. We'll make sure our shots are in fact going and hitting the door. So they're not getting stopped, and if we sit in the collision box, we can shoot out of the collision box. And we can move through the door. Now the question is going to come up as to whether or not you want enemies to be able to trigger the door. This is going to go ahead and determine completely on whatever the setup for your specific level is. If somebody's chasing you and you want them to follow you through the door, you can leave it as is. If you want to specifically make it so only the player can move through the door, on the begin overlap and the end overlap here, you can go ahead and put in a check. So we're going to check the other actor here, and we're going to see if he's equal. And we want to see if he's equal to our 3P player character. And then we can put in a branch and connect at the branch here. And then we can go ahead and duplicate this for our closing as well. And connect up the other actor to the asset that we're checking against. And this will prevent the enemy from actually triggering the doors to open. Now the other problem that we can run into is if you end up allowing the enemy to trigger the doors as well, what can happen is there can be an actor. Let's say, for example, you move through a door, and as you exit the overlap box, it's going to go ahead and trigger the door to close. But if the enemy is already in the overlap box on the other side of the door, it's never going to re-trigger the door to open again, or it's going to close on the enemy character and he's not going to be able to follow after you. So what we need to do in that circumstance is you want to create a count of how many objects are in the overlap boxes. So when somebody crosses in here, you want to have something that keeps count of the number of actors that are in this box and add to that number. So you can create a new variable, and let's say we'll just call this actors in doorway. And you can just make this a simple integer. And so that every time something begins overlap here, if we take this out of play right here, you can go ahead and get our actor's doorway, and we can go ahead and add an integer plus an integer. And then we can go ahead and set the actors in the doorway. So that way, when the actors in the doorway is triggered here, it takes the current number, it adds 1 to it, and it sets that number. And then you can do something very similar when the end overlap exists. So if we duplicate this, we're going to want to get rid of the addition here, and we're going to actually want to perform a subtraction. So you take an integer minus an integer, plug that in. And now, in order to go ahead and actually close the doors, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to put in a branch here, and you're going to want to check to see if this is less than 1. So if we set this to less than 1, go ahead and plug this in, and if that's true, we can go ahead and close the doors, and if false, it won't close the doors. So I'm just going to go ahead and compile and save this here. And the other thing to take in consideration here is you might want to go ahead and play a sound. And I've already gone ahead and imported a sound that I've put into our SFX folder. And I went ahead and made a cue for it. And I set it to our SFX mixer value. Or the, what is it? The sound class for the SFX. So that way we can control it with our volume settings. So what we can do here, very easily, is when we go to call open the doors, we can go ahead and play a sound at location. And we can go ahead and search for the sound we want to play. And use the cue. And for the location, we can just get actor location. Plug this into the location here. And if we want to override values and whatnot, we can do that. I am not going to do that. And then I can just go ahead and duplicate this. And we can use this for our closed door sound as well. Now, the one thing that's going to go ahead and hamper us a little bit is if we exit in the middle of these sounds playing, it's going to start playing the other sound while the door is still opening or closing, or when it changes direction and it starts closing while it's halfway through opening. Well, let's go test this first. So we're going to go ahead and hit play. And as I make my way over to the door here, it plays the noise when it goes ahead and opens, and it plays the noise when it closes. But if I start moving in, it starts doubling up on the sounds because it's playing sounds because these are triggered. Alright, so in order to prevent that from happening, I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable, and we're going to call this isDoorOpen. And we're going to run a check before we open and close the doors. So we want to go ahead and get isDoorOpen. And in the case of the door, we want this to be false. So we're going to search for a nut. And we're going to go ahead and put in a branch. So if that's true, we'll go ahead and play our sound and run the time frame, or the timeline. And we're going to do the same thing for closing the doors, except we don't need the not operator here. So we'll just plug our isDoorOpen directly into the branch, plug in our branch, and connect the true to the play sound at location. And then what we're going to do is from our open door timeline here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to set isDoorOpen after the timeline is finished. So we're going to go ahead and plug that in, and we're going to go ahead and set isDoorOpen to isDoorOpen not. So this is going to flip the value of the isDoorOpen, and we'll go ahead and set that, and we'll go ahead and compile and save. And we're going to have to do one more thing. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to grab all of our stuff here. And other than these open doors, we're going to go ahead and drag it off a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and perform a do once when we open and we close the doors. And then we're going to create a custom event. And we're going to call this reset do once. And we're going to go ahead and plug these into our do once nodes. We're going to have to use a sequence. So we'll plug the then one into our do once for open doors, and we'll plug our then one into the reset for closed doors. And then we're going to have to call our reset do once after we set our is door open as such. So let's go ahead and compile and save that. And we're going to go ahead and hit play. So if we end up making our way into the box here, it opens. And if we walk out, it closes. So I'm going to try and jump out before it finishes playing the animation here. Now we're going to be left with a problem of it is not going to go ahead and close after we jump out. But we have to pass through it again in order to get it to trigger. So in order to take care of that, I'm going to go up to our on component end overlap here. When we go ahead and close the doors, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in a delay. And I'm going to make it a retriggerable delay. So that way if something else walks out of it again, like something walks in and out of it, we can retrigger this delay once again. And I'm going to set it to a count of 1. And we're going to go ahead and compile and save. And if we hit play, and we move into the box, and if I jump out before it completes, it'll wait a second after opening, and then it'll go ahead and close again. Now in my particular case, I only want it to go ahead and open and close the doors for the player character. So, in order to do that simply, I'm just going to take the other actor and I'm going to go ahead and cast to our 3P player character. So if the cast is successful, it'll go ahead and open the door. And then I'll duplicate it down here. And once again, cast to the other actor. And if it's successful, we'll go ahead and trigger the door to close. And then I'm just going to get rid of all these event begin plays and overlaps in the event tick here, as we're not going to end up needing this, and I will just go ahead and clean this up a little bit. All right, to summarize what we're doing here is when we begin overlap with our collision box, it is going to go ahead and cast to our 3P player character, and it's going to go ahead and open the doors. So when it calls open the doors, it's going to go ahead and check. We're going to have a do once in place, so it can't be repeated until it's reset. And then it's going to check to see if the door is not open. We'll go ahead and play the sound at the location. And then we'll go ahead and trigger the open door timeline, which is going to lerp the position of the door from closed to open. And it's going to set the location of the left door and set the location of the right door. Once it's completed with the timeline, it's going to go ahead and flip-flop the is door open variable. and then it's going to go ahead and re-trigger the do once over here. Now, once that has been completed, when something ends overlapping with our character, I'm checking to see if it is the player character. We're going to throw in a delay, and the delay here is going to be based on the timeline right here. And once the retriggerable delay completes, it's going to go ahead and close the door. Now, if something else ends up causing this to go ahead and cause an end overlap event again, it's going to go ahead and re-trigger this delay for us. So unlike the standard delay, if this event fires again, this is going to reset the timer to the beginning of our duration. So once we close the closed doors here, it's going to perform a do once. It's going to check to see if the door is in fact open. If the door has been opened, it's going to go ahead and get our location, play a sound, and then it's going to go ahead and play the open door timeline in reverse. And once it goes ahead and finishes that, it's going to go ahead and flip-flop our is door open, and then it's going to call the reset on the do once again. So that way we now have a functioning doorway. That our character can go ahead and move in and out of. Now, if you wanted to do something like a one-way door, I'm going to go ahead and in our blueprints, let's see if I can find it again. So in our common object for our base door blueprint, we can create a child blueprint, and we'll call this a one-way door underscore blueprint. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put this on the other side of the room here. And we're just going to go ahead and drop this guy into place. And we'll go ahead and save that. We're going to open up our one-way door blueprint. And we're going to have to make some changes to this guy. So I'm going to grab our box 1. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut the value of this back down to 4 for the X dimension. So I'm going to scale it down so that it is not as thick. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to put it into a position of 160 so that it fits only on one side of the door. And so we're going to clear when we're putting in the level. I'm going to search for an arrow. And I'm going to go ahead and position this arrow somewhere up here so it's facing through the direction of the travel of the door. So that way when we're placing in the level, we can quickly look at this and we can tell, is it traveling one way, the direction that we want it to do. So I've already dropped this in the level, and as you can see here, the arrow is facing only one way. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this around. And the collision box only exists on one side of our doorway now. So it can only be triggered from one side. So let's go ahead and play it. So if our character moves up to our first doorway, we can go ahead and trigger that open and trigger it closed. And we can pass through it yet again. And now we're reaching our one-way door. So if I move up to this and I pass through it, I can no longer travel back through the door again. And then if we want to go ahead and set doors to being locked, we put that variable in there in the first place. So if we go back into our base door blueprint here, we're going to have to go ahead and check when we actually open the doors and close the doors. So just real fast, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to drag this off a little bit. And we're going to go ahead and get our is locked variable here. And we're going to go ahead and put a branch in. And I'm going to use a not operator on this because we want to make sure the door is not locked. Plug this into our condition and plug our branch in. And I'll go ahead and duplicate this for the opening as well. And we'll go ahead and compile and save this. And if we go back to our level, I'm going to go ahead and set this first door. We'll notice over here under the details pane, there's the is door locked. We can go ahead and set this. And we can save. Now if we hit play and we approach the doorway, it is not going to go ahead and open for us. Now one last thing we want to do is, I'm going to unset that so we can get through our doorway again. In our base door here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new function. And I'm going to call this set is door locked. And we're just going to go ahead and set our is door locked. And we'll connect it up to the input here. So we can go ahead and compile and save this. So that way now, if we have some other kind of event that's going on that triggers the door to unlock, like say there's a panel and we activate the panel, it goes ahead and unlocks the door. We now have this function that we can call upon within the level blueprints to go ahead and unlock our door. So that's going to complete today's video. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below. And thanks for watching.